right, guys, today we're going to talk about why the carnivore diet is the only true elimination diet. I've spent years watching people battle autoimmune conditions, gut dysfunction, brain fog, and chronic fatigue. They bounce from one elimination protocol to another, low-FODMAP, AIP, gluten-free, dairy-free, you name it. And while some get temporary relief, most never truly fix the root cause. What I've seen, both personally and in thousands of people I've interacted with, is that once you strip everything down to the most nutrient-dense, least inflammatory food on the planet, meat, you see a level of healing that nothing else can deliver. The reality is, plants aren't neutral. They come with their own built-in defense mechanisms. Lectins, oxalates, phytates, insoluble fibers. These compounds may not bother everyone, but for people with already irritated guts or dysregulated immune systems, they can be the gasoline poured on the fire. Add in seed oils and ultra-processed plant-derived foods, and you have the perfect recipe for chronic inflammation. When you take those out, when you go full carnivore, your body finally gets a chance to reset without the constant barrage of irritants. Now, I'm not telling you this is theory. I've seen it time and again, people going from decades of suffering to real relief within weeks. Their skin clears up, their digestion stabilizes, their energy skyrockets. And it's not magic. It's simply removing the triggers that other elimination diets leave behind. So in this talk, I'm going to walk you through 6 powerful reasons why the carnivore diet stands alone as the ultimate elimination strategy. We'll cover gut health, immune regulation, nutrient density, mental clarity, metabolic healing, and the long-term sustainability most people don't realize is possible. This is where the real reset begins. When most people think about food sensitivities, they focus on the obvious culprits, gluten, dairy, maybe soy. That's where most elimination diets start. They take out a handful of common allergens and hope that by narrowing the menu, the body will calm down. And yes, for some people, there's a bit of short-term relief. But if you dig deeper into why the immune system is constantly on high alert, or why the gut lining continues to take damage, you find that the triggers are more insidious. They're baked right into the plants we've been told are health foods. Take lectins, for example. These are proteins that plants produce as a defense mechanism against being eaten. They bind to carbohydrates in the gut, stick to the lining, and can increase intestinal permeability, what most people know as leaky gut. For someone with a healthy gut and a robust immune system, maybe that's not catastrophic. But if you're already inflamed, already dealing with autoimmune conditions, lectins can fan the flames. They're in beans, legumes, grains, even so-called superfoods. An elimination diet that lets you keep beans, rice, or certain vegetables still leaves you wide open to that trigger. Then there are oxalates. These compounds bind to minerals like calcium and magnesium, preventing absorption and forming sharp crystals in the body. For sensitive people, oxalates can contribute to kidney stones, joint pain, and systemic inflammation. Spinach, almonds, sweet potatoes, foods that often show up in clean eating or Whole30 type plans are loaded with oxalates. So you cut out bread and sugar, but if you're pounding down almond flour muffins or spinach salads, you may just be swapping one irritant for another. Seed oils are another silent driver. They're marketed as heart healthy, yet they're highly processed, unstable fats loaded with omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Once oxidized, these oils create inflammatory byproducts that directly damage cell membranes. They show up in everything from dressings to health snacks, and most elimination diets don't even bother addressing them. You can be gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and still be dousing your body in inflammatory seed oils every day. And let's not forget fiber. We've been conditioned to think more fiber is always better. But for someone with an inflamed gut, IBS, or Crohn's, excessive insoluble fiber can be like sandpaper on an open wound. It irritates, bloats, and perpetuates the cycle of dysbiosis. Low-FODMAP diets attempt to manage fermentable carbs, but they still keep plenty of fibrous vegetables on the menu. That's often why people feel a little better, but never fully well. They're still grinding their guts with foods their system can't tolerate. This is the blind spot of most elimination diets. They remove the surface level offenders, but leave behind a minefield of plant-based irritants. People stick with them, white knuckle their way through the rules, and then wonder why their joint pain, rashes, or brain fog never completely resolve. The missing link is recognizing that it's not just gluten or dairy. It's an entire category of compounds that plants use as defense strategies. What makes the carnivore approach different is its simplicity and its completeness. By removing all plants, you take out the lectins, the oxalates, the seed oils, problematic fibers in one sweep. You're not guessing, you're not playing whack-a-mole with food lists. You're giving your body a clean slate. Meat doesn't contain these irritants. It provides complete proteins, bioavailable nutrients, and stable fats without the chemical warfare that plants naturally come with. For someone who has struggled with autoimmune flares or chronic gut distress, this can be the turning point. Instead of constantly wondering which healthy food is secretly keeping them sick, they eliminate all the hidden drivers in one move. That's why people see transformations on carnivore that they never got on low-FODMAP, AIP, or Whole30. Those diets pull off the easy layers, but carnivore digs down to the root. It strips out the silent irritants that were never meant to be in a compromised system in the first place, allowing healing to finally take hold. When people talk about healing the gut, they usually mean calming symptoms, less bloating, less cramping, fewer bathroom emergencies. But if you want a true reset, you have to think about what the gut is up against every single day. Every bite of food that passes through your digestive tract either helps repair the lining and nourish the system, or it keeps the fire smoldering with irritants, allergens, and fermentable compounds that never give your gut a break. Most diets marketed as gut healing still keep a laundry list of foods that can act like sandpaper on already damaged tissue. That's why so many people spin their wheels trying low-FODMAP, AIP, or other elimination plans. They get a little relief, but the underlying dysfunction continues. When you cut out plants entirely, something different happens. You remove the lectins, oxalates, insoluble fibers, and fermentable carbs that fuel bacterial overgrowth and irritation. You take away the allergens that sneak into even clean foods. What's left is a diet that's easily digestible, minimally inflammatory, and completely absorbed before it has a chance to rot or ferment in the colon. For a gut that's been battered by years of abuse, that's like stepping out of a war zone and finally getting to rest. Leaky gut is a great example. The lining of the small intestine is only one cell thick, and when it's inflamed, the tight junctions loosen, allowing particles of food and bacterial toxins to leak into circulation. That's what kicks the immune system into overdrive and leads to autoimmune flare-ups, rashes, joint pain, and brain fog. Grains, legumes, certain vegetables all can contribute to that permeability through compounds like lectins and saponins. A low-FODMAP plan might take out some fermentable carbs, but it doesn't remove the compounds that directly damage the gut lining. Carnivore does. And when you're not constantly tearing holes in the wall, the body can finally repair and seal the barrier. Then there's the microbiome. We've been sold this idea that more diversity is always better, but the reality is, for someone with SABO, IBS, or dysbiosis, too much bacterial growth is the problem. Fermentable fibers and plant sugars feed that overgrowth, creating gas, bloating, and pain. On carnivore, you remove the fuel source, the overgrowth dies back, balance is restored, and symptoms improve, not because you're forcing it with probiotics or antimicrobials, but because you've starved the problem. What remains is a leaner, more stable microbial environment that doesn't overwhelm the gut. I've heard the same story from countless people. They tried every elimination diet, kept food journals, tested for sensitivities, spent thousands on supplements. They'd improve a little, then hit a wall. It wasn't until they stripped everything down to meat, salt, and water that their digestion truly calmed. IBS patients who couldn't leave the house without mapping every bathroom suddenly found themselves symptom-free. People with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis who lived in fear of flare-ups finally put their disease into remission, even those with chronic bloating, reflux, or constipation, things they thought were just part of life, discovered what it felt like to have a quiet gut. That's the difference. Other elimination diets try to fine-tune the problem by removing certain categories of food, but they always leave triggers behind. You're left playing detective, wondering if it's the garlic, the onions, the almonds, or the spinach that's setting you off. With carnivore, you take the entire category of irritants off the table. The gut gets a true pause, a clean slate to repair without interference. And when you do that, the results are on a different level. People sometimes ask if it's extreme. I'd argue what's extreme is living your life chain to digestive problems, running on medications, or carrying around a constant burden of inflammation. What's extreme is trying diet after diet and never actually healing. Carnivore works not because it's trendy or restrictive, but because it's the only approach that actually gives the gut the rest it's been begging for. When the noise stops, the body knows how to repair itself. It just needs the chance. Autoimmune disease is one of the most frustrating conditions to live with because the symptoms are unpredictable and often don't make sense. One day you're fine. The next your joints are swollen, your skin is flaring, or you're buried under crushing fatigue. Traditional medicine usually manages these conditions with drugs that suppress the immune system. They might dull the fire, but they don't address why the immune system is misfiring in the first place. That's where diet comes in. And while many people experiment with things like gluten-free paleo or autoimmune protocol diets, the reality is those approaches often leave key triggers in place. The immune system reacts to what it perceives as antigens, proteins, or compounds that resemble threats. Plants are full of these compounds. Lectins, gluten, like proteins, saponins, and even certain plant fibers can act like irritants that the immune system flags as hostile. In someone with a healthy gut and a tolerant immune system, these compounds might slip under the radar. But in someone genetically predisposed to autoimmune disease, they can keep the immune system in a constant state of overdrive. That's why joint pain, brain fog, rashes, or thyroid dysfunction often flare after meals, even if by normal standards. Animal-based foods, by contrast, are about as non-immunogenic as it gets. The proteins in beef, lamb, pork, fish, and eggs are structurally similar to our own tissues, so the immune system doesn't see them as foreign invaders. They digest cleanly without leaving behind fragments that provoke an antibody response. That's one of the reasons carnivore can be so effective. It doesn't just remove obvious allergens like gluten or soy. It removes the subtler antigenic triggers that continue to poke the immune system on other elimination diets. Consider rheumatoid arthritis. Many patients notice that their pain and stiffness fluctuate with diet, but AIP or paleo rarely provides complete remission. When those same patients go fully carnivore, something different happens. The swelling recedes, joints loosen, and the daily pain that felt inevitable begins to fade. By taking out the compounds that were stoking antibody production in the first place, their immune system calms and stops attacking their own tissues. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is another example. Standard advice focuses on cutting gluten and dairy, which can help, but many patients still feel brain foggy, exhausted, and inflamed. When they try carnivore, their antibodies often drop further and their energy returns. By removing every antigenic plant protein, not just gluten, they eliminate the background noise that kept their immune system on high alert. Lupus and psoriasis follow the same logic. In lupus, widespread inflammation makes people hypersensitive to sunlight, fatigue, and acne. In psoriasis, the immune system accelerates skin cell turnover, leaving red, scaly patches. Both conditions are notorious for flaring with diet and lifestyle stressors. When people shift to carnivore, the stories are striking: skin clearing for the first time in decades, fatigue lifting, flares disappearing. It's not a miracle. It's simply removing the compounds that were misdirecting the immune response all along. The science here is still emerging, but it's pointing in the same direction. Studies show that dietary antigens can cross a leaky gut barrier and trigger systemic immune reactions. Other research highlights how certain plant compounds act as molecular mimics, resembling human tissue and confusing the immune system into attacking the body. The more you expose yourself to those triggers, the more the immune system stays primed for attack. Remove them completely, and the system finally gets a chance to recalibrate. I've spoken with countless people who spent years experimenting with different protocols, supplements, and medications, only to find that nothing worked until they went fully animal-based. One woman with severe psoriasis had tried every cream and biologic drug available. Within 3 months of carnivore, her skin was clear for the first time in her adult life. Another man with rheumatoid arthritis who could barely grip a coffee mug in the morning was lifting weights again after 6 weeks. These aren't isolated cases. They're the consistent pattern when the immune system is no longer bombarded by antigenic foods. The takeaway is simple: autoimmune conditions thrive in an environment of chronic immune activation. Most elimination diets reduce the load but don't eliminate it. Carnivore is unique because it strips the diet down to the least immunogenic, most bioavailable foods available to humans. When the immune system finally has nothing left to react to, it shifts out of attack mode and into repair mode. That's when symptoms quiet, inflammation drops, and people get their lives back. One of the biggest struggles people face with any diet isn't necessarily what they eat, but how much they eat. Hunger drives behavior more than willpower ever can. That's why most elimination diets eventually fail, not because people don't want to stick to them, but because they can't overcome the constant hunger, cravings, and blood sugar swings baked into those plans. You can remove gluten, dairy, or processed sugar, but if the diet still relies on plant-based carbs and fibers, you're left riding the same cycle of energy spikes, dips, and late night snacking. The carnivore diet flips that script by putting satiety front and center. Animal-based foods are uniquely capable of turning off hunger because they provide the two things the body is hardwired to seek: protein and essential nutrients. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient. When you eat steak, eggs, or fish, your body releases hormones like peptide YY and GLP-1 that signal fullness to the brain. You simply stop wanting more food. Compare that to a plate of plant-based foods, even if it's technically clean, and you're often left circling the kitchen an hour later. Protein tells your physiology that you've had enough, while carbs and fiber keep the hunger loop open. Nutrient density is another factor. Humans don't just eat for calories, we eat for micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, fatty acids. When the body isn't getting enough of these, keeps nudging you to eat more, hoping you'll eventually supply what's missing. That's why people on plant-heavy elimination diets often find themselves overeating healthy snacks or binging after periods of restriction. Their bodies are searching for bioavailable nutrition they're not getting. Animal foods solve this problem by delivering highly absorbable iron, zinc, B12, retinol, heme iron, and essential fatty acids. Once those needs are met, appetite naturally dials back. Stable blood sugar also plays a massive role. Diets that include carbs, whether it's fruit, sweet potatoes, or even gluten-free grains, set people up for swings in glucose and insulin. Blood sugar spikes after a carb-heavy meal, then drops, triggering hunger, irritability, and cravings. It's a roller coaster that can dominate your day. On carnivore, without those carbs in the mix, blood sugar remains steady, energy levels or even cravings fade, and the brain isn't hijacked by the constant push for the next hit of glucose. That stability alone explains why so many people say food stops controlling their lives once they go animal-based. There are endless stories of people who spent years trying to manage their appetite on other elimination diets, always white-knuckling their way through cravings. One person I worked with had cycled through Whole30, Paleo, and Keto, but she could never stop overeating nut butters, healthy baked goods, or piles of vegetables smothered in dressing. When she finally went carnivore, she was shocked at how quickly her appetite normalized. Meals became simple, a few steaks a day, sometimes eggs or fish. She stopped thinking about food 24/7, and for the first time in her life, she felt in control. without trying. Another man who struggled with obesity for decades said the same thing. He had tried calorie counting, intermittent fasting, and AIP, but always felt ravenous and deprived. Within weeks of eating only meat, his cravings disappeared. He described it as flipping a switch. His brain wasn't begging for snacks anymore, and he could go long stretches between meals effortlessly. That's not willpower, that's physiology working the way it's supposed to when it's fueled properly. This is what makes carnivore different from every other elimination approach. It doesn't just remove potential irritants, it removes the very cycle of hunger and cravings that undermines compliance. Instead of fighting your body, you're working with it. High protein, dense nutrition, and stable blood sugar combine to create true satiety, the kind that allows you to eat to fullness and then move on with your life. You don't have to track, measure, or obsess because your body finally feels satisfied. When you strip away all the noise and just fuel on the foods your physiology is built for, eating becomes intuitive again. You eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and you don't think about it until the next time genuine hunger shows up. That's the satiety advantage, and it's the reason carnivore is not just another elimination diet, but the first one people actually feel liberated by rather than restricted. One of the most overlooked effects of diet is what happens between your ears. People usually change the way they eat to lose weight, fix digestion, or manage autoimmune issues. But ask anyone who's gone full carnivore what surprised them the most, and they'll often tell you it was the way their brain woke up, the fog lifted, their focus sharpened, and the anxiety or mood swings they thought were just part of life started to fade. That mental clarity isn't an accident. It's the predictable result of removing irritants, stabilizing energy supply, and fueling the brain the way it was designed to run. Plant foods contain compounds that don't just irritate the gut, they can also affect the brain. Oxalates, lectins, and certain phytochemicals can cross the gut barrier when it's inflamed and interact with the nervous system. For someone predisposed to sensitivity, that means headaches, cloudy thinking, poor memory, or even mood instability. Other elimination diets that still rely on safe vegetables, nuts, or gluten-free grains leave these compounds in place. People may feel a little better, but that the fog never truly clears. Carnivore is different because it pulls those plant toxins out completely, removing a hidden layer of stress on the nervous system. Blood sugar stability plays another massive role in brain performance. Every time glucose spikes and crashes, the brain feels it. Highs are followed by lows, fatigue, irritability, lack of concentration. People stuck on partial elimination diets that include fruit, sweet potatoes, or nut flours still ride that roller coaster. Carnivore takes away the instability. Without constant carb input, blood sugar and insulin flatten out, and the brain receives a steady supply of fuel. No more crashes, no more brain running on fumes by mid-afternoon. On top of that, the brain thrives on ketones, the byproduct of burning fat for energy. Ketones are not only a cleaner fuel than glucose, they also promote neuroprotection, reduce inflammation in the brain, and may support the growth of new neural connections. That's why people in ketosis often describe an almost effortless mental focus. Carnivore naturally puts the body in a state where ketones are readily available, and the result is often a level of clarity people didn't even realize they were missing. The real world stories are powerful. I've talked to people who spent years battling depression and anxiety, trying every supplement and therapy, only to discover that going animal-based was the missing link. One man with lifelong ADHD said that after 3 months on carnivore, he could finally sit down and focus on work without his mind bouncing around. Another woman who described herself as living in a mental fog for decades said she finally felt like herself again, calm, clear, and present. Parents of kids with behavioral issues have reported similar experiences. Children who were constantly distracted, anxious, or moody suddenly became stable and focused when their diets were simplified to meat and animal fats. That's not placebo, that's physiology. When the brain isn't constantly inflamed or chasing unstable glucose, it can perform the way it's supposed to. Contrast this with partial elimination diets. AIP paleo, whole 30, even keto versions that still rely on nut flours or heavy vegetables can help to a degree, but they don't usually unlock the same cognitive shift. That's because those approaches don't fully eliminate the plant toxins or blood sugar swings that keep the brain stuck in second gear. People often notice incremental improvement, but not the full light switch effect. Carnivore stands out because it takes the interference away completely and fuels the brain with the most stable, nutrient-rich sources available. There's also the emotional side. Mood isn't just about psychology, it's deeply tied to biochemistry. Chronic inflammation, unstable energy, and nutrient deficiencies can all drive anxiety, irritability, and depression. When you eat a carnivore diet, inflammation drops, energy stabilizes, and your brain gets everything it needs in the right form: B12, DHA, zinc, and fat-soluble vitamins like A and D. That combination creates a foundation for emotional resilience. Many people report not just sharper thinking, but a more even, positive outlook they couldn't find through other diets or even medications. The bottom line is that mental clarity and cognitive benefits aren't fringe side effects of carnivore. They're central to why it works. When you stop poisoning the system with plant compounds, stop stressing it with blood sugar swings, and start fueling it with ketones and dense nutrition, the brain finally gets to operate at full capacity. And for people who've lived in a haze of fog, fatigue, or instability, that change can be life-altering. It's easy to get excited about carnivore because for so many people, it's the first thing that truly moves the needle on their health. When the gut calms down, when autoimmune flares quiet, when the brain fog lifts, it feels like a rebirth. But as powerful as this way of eating is, it's important to keep perspective. Carnivore is the cornerstone. It's the only true elimination diet, the clean slate that gives your body the reset it's been craving, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Health is multi-dimensional, and if you want to thrive long-term, you have to build on that foundation with lifestyle choices that support the same healing principles. Sleep is the first one that can't be ignored. You can eat perfectly, but if you're short changing your sleep, you're fighting an uphill battle. The body repairs itself at night, hormones regulate, the immune system recalibrates. Skimping on deep, restorative sleep is like taking 2 steps forward with your diet and 1 step back with your recovery. Prioritizing consistent sleep patterns, minimizing late night blue light, and giving yourself a wind down routine is just as important as what's on your plate. Movement is another pillar. Carnivore provides the fuel, but your body was built to move. Strength training, walking, mobility, work, all of these not only build resilience, but also reinforce the benefits of the diet by improving insulin sensitivity, circulation, and joint health. It doesn't need to be extreme, but it does need to be consistent. Pairing animal-based nutrition with regular physical activity creates a synergy that accelerates healing and makes the improvements sustainable. Stress management can't be overlooked either. Chronic stress is its own toxin. It drives cortisol dysregulation, disrupts digestion, weakens immunity, and can even mimic or worsen autoimmune flares. Carnivore strips away dietary stressors, but if your life is a constant barrage of mental and emotional strain, you'll blunt the progress. Practices like breath work, meditation, spending time in nature, or simply learning to say no more often can all reinforce the reset carnivore provides. Then there's circadian alignment. Humans didn't evolve under fluorescent lights and glowing screens at midnight. Our biology is tied to the rhythm of the sun. Getting outside in the morning, exposing your eyes and skin to natural light, anchoring your sleep-wake cycle to daylight, all of these cues help your body regulate hormones, digestion, and energy. Eating in sync with those rhythms rather than grazing late into the night amplifies the stability you gain from a clean carnivore diet. When you put all of this together, the picture becomes clear. Carnivore clears the deck. It removes the irritants, resets the gut, calms the immune system, and stabilizes the brain. But the body still needs the environment it was built for: restorative sleep, consistent movement, stress that's managed instead of chronic, and a rhythm that matches the natural world. That's the bigger picture of thriving. And it's why people who combine carnivore with these habits often feel not just better, but transformed. I've seen people heal chronic conditions with diet alone, but the ones who take it further, who optimize their sleep, move daily, manage their stress, and align with their circadian biology, those are the ones who don't just get out of the hole, they build a life of resilience. Carnivore is the starting point, the foundation. From there, you decide how high you want to build. So now I want to hear from you. Have you noticed changes in your autoimmune symptoms, gut health, or mental clarity since trying carnivore? What was the biggest shift for you? Share your story, because every experience adds to the growing understanding of just how powerful this way of eating can be.